Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Robinson, and today we've got a very different type of meetup. We're going to try out panel sessions and review the last 8 years of Ethereum, blockchain, and the meetup in particular. And everything's actually coming through from a filter of the meetup's perspective. So I've banged out some slides, which we'll hopefully share and work out. And I will have another go at dragging that across there and that across there. Okay, so the meetup has been going for just under 8 years. First talks were actually in, I think, January or February 2018, but the inception of it happened 8 years ago. So I think we've got 8 years. And so a few of the people who are going to be helping me tell this story have said, hey, this could go for 3 hours. Let's not do that. And so I said, all right, what we'll try and do is we'll try and cap each section at a certain amount of time. And we're even going to have time breaks through. And so where we're going to start the story is the origin story. And so essentially, the meetup started in Brisbane, Australia, as an in-person thing at ThoughtWorks seminar space. And so we did the initial conversations with the people at ThoughtWorks, guy called Scott, back in 2017. And so to help me on this discussion, we've got Brett and Rob. So the three of us were in the room with Scott doing the discussion in late 2017, really talking about things and trying to convince him to let us run a meetup at ThoughtWorks. And so, I don't know, Rob, do you want to talk to where was blockchain in 2017, or where was blockchain from, so all three of us were working at Consensus. I think that's something fair to say, wasn't it? So where was Consensus and Consensus in Brisbane in particular? Give us a bit of a backdrop of that.
Yeah, so I think Consensus in Brisbane was kind of going through an interesting growth stage. The group that we were with was Pegasus. So it was Consensus at that point in time was very much running in a hub and spoke kind of model, kind of crazy worlds of anyone with an idea pretty much could go pitch to Joe. I think of it as after the phase where people would join Consensus and go on a journey, and then eventually you'd work out what job you're going to do, to the spot where in that late 2017 people were being hired into specific jobs, which was a novel thing for Consensus, but I think a good step forward for them as a company. And that's where we sort of stepped in. We were all kind of joining the Pegasus kind of group, helping to think about the core kind of engineering. One of the big pushes at that point in time was, I think, enterprise Ethereum, and thinking about private permissioned kind of networks and what that sort of world would look like. And it was very much the starting of that kind of push, and that's kind of where the Brisbane team was kind of coalescing and growing around. And so we were sort of bringing a bunch of great experience from different places into the company, and into, I think, Brisbane, and helping to sort of seed this kind of Ethereum happening in the meetup. And I think the engineering meetup was very much trying to be a spot that was making it so that it was both a place where good engineering conversations could happen, uh, within, I guess, Consensus and around Consensus, but also trying to be a place where you could have that. It wasn't just Consensus. It wasn't the Consensus Enterprise Engineering group, or the Consensus Ethereum Engineering group. It was the Ethereum Engineering group that was very much being supported and driven by Consensus, but wasn't trying to be a Consensus group. I think that's probably the things that sort of stand out for me. It was very much Brisbane and Consensus sort of people wanting to help foster that spirit of engineering, and giving that real kind of conversation space around things there.
Yeah. And what about you, Brett? What are your thoughts?
So if I think back to 2017, so I joined Consensus and Pegasus, as Rob pointed out, was the group that Peter, you were involved in and brought us into around, I think, September 2017. Having spent a decade or more working with a software company, I was also interested in how do we grow the the space? How do we find great people in this space? I was exposed to the ideas way before this that, Brisbane could be a central hub for technology development. It didn't need to have its customers in Brisbane. It could be anywhere in the world. And so I wanted to promote the idea of Ethereum and blockchain technologies in this space, as well as using the idea of how do we get good people into this space and joining Consensus and going on this overall journey. As Rob pointed out, Pegasus was the blockchain protocol part of Consensus, and so we were very much thinking about it from an engineering perspective. And so the original conversations around this was how do we promote the concepts of Ethereum? How do we teach people the underpinning technology so that they can either choose to build on the blockchain or contribute to the protocol discussions that were occurring in both the enterprise and in, not too long into 2018. Obviously, the conversations had skipped into Ethereum 2.0. And so we wanted the thing to be supported by Consensus, but not personal, not branded as Consensus, because we didn't want to dissuade people from the overall community in Brisbane from joining. There were already existing meetups around blockchain that they were primarily focused on Bitcoin or cryptocurrency related things and the Bitcoin environment, and some were related to the kind of apps and the technology, the solutions that could be built on top of that. And so we didn't want to ostracize them by saying, well, this is Consensus, but we did want to kind of promote Ethereum as being the backing. So very much those early conversations between the three of us and others was aligned to how do we promote Ethereum? How do we promote good technology discussions? How do we build a center of excellence, for want of a better word, in the Brisbane market, Brisbane environment that was looking at this new technology called blockchain and specifically Ethereum? And that's when we kicked off this. And so, when you get onto the next part of the conversation today, which is looking at some of the kind of structure of what we were talking about in 2018, it was very much focused in those early stages of let's talk about this technology, let's get people understanding it, because the gateway into the whole environment was understanding this new, the ability to build dApps and to be able to put code onto the blockchain. Very much new for a lot of people who were interested in blockchain technology at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. I mean, for myself, my background had been I worked at RSA for 13 years, which is a IT security company. And what I found was that we were this satellite minor development center. And so Pegasus was just starting. Like there was Shahan, Dan, and me co-founding the group. And what I realized was that, we needed to hire engineering. You know, they could be anywhere in the world. And I'm thinking, if we hire a lot of people in Brisbane, then Brisbane won't be this tiny little satellite group that, last to be hired into, first to be downsized and all that sort of thing. And so, yeah, so one of my drivers for the meetup was to train people in Brisbane about blockchain. So we'd have more people to hire. So we'd be able to hire more people and out hire Toronto and New York, which were the then potential development centers. And maybe the thing was I wasn't fully happy with the whole remote thing at the time. It was an interesting new thing for me. So I'd worked remote back in the late 90s, but yeah, as far as actually running a whole org remote it was a new idea. But we started out no office, and so yeah, it was, and that's why we used ThoughtWorks, was because we had no office. Um, we were essentially working from home. Then we rented a room that I think we had an office room in a building for, I think we had it for like 8 days or 6 days a month. So we cut some deal where we could get it at a super, super cheap price. But yeah, so we didn't have an office. So that's why ThoughtWorks. So at the time, there were meetups that were Ethereum meetups. and yeah, trying to navigate how we related to them. And the reason why I think we needed to be different was that the other meetups were a little bit too much. Is the price of ETH going to go up or not? And in fact, the Scott from ThoughtWorks didn't really want to have like the Ethereum engineering meetup. He said, "Oh, look, having meetup in the title is really bad because meetups are really bad because they're all about if crypto is going to go up or not. So they're not technology, so no one's interested." So he was the one who forced us then on the spot to come up with something. So I don't know which one of us came up with the word group, but that's where group came from. The fact that people were worried that we were just going to have some scammy ICOE crypto thing. Yeah. So, Brett, did you think that we would be having a conversation in around about 8 years' time?
That's a really interesting question. Considering the state of flux of things over the time, uh, in retrospective, I'm a little surprised. But at the beginning, this was where we were at. Meetups were common in this space for technology. They were something that promoted it in our area. The I did expect that we were getting larger and larger turnouts during that early part of 2018 into 2017. I think because we did stand out from what is the price of trading versus, actually building technology, building solutions on it. Um, I expected it to be around. I don't know if I expected it to grow to the size of the international participation, the number of people that have joined our meetup and joined the group since then. From 2020 onwards, I don't think I would have, if you'd asked me if that was what's going to happen, there's a small meetup in Brisbane was going to get a larger footprint globally in this space, I would not have expected that. I was very much focused on the growth of the technology, the growth of people in Brisbane, supporting the software industry in Brisbane, which is one that most of us here are part of anyway. And then also, like yourself, being fully remote for the first time, this gave me the opportunity to, as a forcing function, for us to come in once a fortnight, once a week, or whatever it was we were doing in those days, and catch up in person with people, and then go to the meetup. And realistically, the ThoughtWorks team were generous in using that space for us because we were promoting as engineering. And I suspect those early conversations allowed us to continue to do that. But I wouldn't have predicted it to be where it is today, 8 years later at the beginning.
Yeah. 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 I don't think I thought about it. So we've talked a fair bit about the origin story. So let's talk about the first year or so. So with this one, we've got Rob, Roberto, and I are going to try and take this one on. And and so we had, this is the list of the first year-ish talks, and I've tried to classify them in the right-hand side there. But you did what, a few of those talks there in the really early days there, Rob. And I remember you and I discussing what the architecture of an Ethereum client was and trying to work through a block diagram and going, is that right? Will someone call us out if we're wrong? I don't know. Tell me about your thoughts on the start.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think some of the key things that we see sort of in those early ones is there's a lot of architecture, how do things work, what's the sort of core parts of Ethereum, what does that look like? And it tied back to what we were really learning at that time as well. And so I think that was kind of that interesting kind of combination around things. I still know that some of the ones that did stand out and some of the validation that we were getting our learnings right was getting people inside of consensus referring back to some of those videos and saying, actually, I didn't really understand. I definitely remember talking with E.G. Galano, one of the founders of Infura, and him talking about that Ethereum and P2P protocols talk being like a piece that sort of helped that he would refer back to and say that that was something that was important for him. So I think there was definitely this sense of we were questioning ourselves as we were learning, but then we'd get the validation that the things that we were talking about were useful and helpful for people both locally inside that our group, but then broader as well.
Yeah.
I just want to throw 2 cents in there. I think the other thing that helped with that was that at the time it wasn't that common, especially in the Brisbane meetup space, to record and publish them to YouTube. And so from the very beginning, Peter, you pushed for us to put these things out there. And I think that drives very much what you just said then, Rob, is that this became an early resource center for everyone who was in this space. Was we had these deep technical conversations, from people like yourself and Peter and Adrian Sutton, who was part of the team at that point as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny when I look at it, some of the learnings and stuff. And so I did. So the cryptography talks were done right at the start, and part of that was because I just happened to have the content available because I used to do a cryptography talk. But then we hired this guy from Sydney who I was really not sure about, being Roberto, because he was not from Brisbane, but we hired him anyway, and he was very knowledgeable. So Roberto, you then ended up doing quite a few cryptography talks over the time, including that Zcash protocol. I'm sure that's you. So do you want to tell us about your thoughts on 2018 and, cryptography and just generally all of the talks?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I did that Zcash talk. I thought, going a bit back to my story, got into to the space in 2017. I joined the Sydney Meetup that was running. There was kind of more a workshop-like talk, like event, and I thought there was people were more on the application layer, and they seemed to be interesting in cryptography. So that's where initially the idea of trying to explain a bit how just digital signatures work came from. So I did a talk at a meetup way back, and then I thought, well, we can increase the complexity to explain a bit how Zcash works. And at the time, I think I know there is far more material and people working on zero knowledge proof. But at the time, I think was quite of more of a seen as a black magic. So I thought would have been interesting to try to also for my own learning, to be honest, to try to explain and put in slides how the protocol works. And I think we've seen a lot of looking at the story in terms of zero knowledge proof and cryptography. We've seen a lot of especially most recent development in Ethereum to be driven by massive advancement in cryptography, especially in snarks, which at the beginning was kind of more in a way simple standard cryptography, but I think it wasn't until later when we moved to this more rollup centric roadmap where I think resources were put into improving significantly zero knowledge proof protocols.
Yeah. Yeah. So so here I've got all of the talks that we did that were on core Ethereum and then on Solidity over the time. And you probably need a magnifying glass to look at all the Solidity ones. And the Solidity ones are actually application level things as well. And there's even things like Chainalysis in there. So maybe some of them are more application. But and there's things like the hacks, like looking at the poly network hack. And so I think they're very similar to, I think, what you were saying, Rob, about how we started out by doing things that we were learning about, like Truffle, MetaMask, and Remix, and how do you develop stuff? And then yeah, golly, then we started really progressing though by the time we're into 2019 and really like doing far more most of these things are later, not in the early days. And I guess we had some very early talks on Solidity and the EVM, but yeah, which are there. But yeah, things moved on. And for core Ethereum, like we started out in essentially what the client design was about. And then it's been more point things like, how does this checkpoint sync work? Or state expiry, that's a proposal. How did that work? Or, what's the proposal and then where did it get to? And even things like in recent times, the 3-slot finality, which may come to fruition, but maybe something will supersede it. So yeah, I think we've evolved from the early days when it was about stuff that definitively existed and trying to understand it to moving to talking about stuff that might exist and how things have evolved. And also, I think early on I was really paranoid about letting people do talks on products, and because it felt like product selling. And then but then TurboGeth, which has changed its name, and I can't remember the name of it. But anyway,
Aragon?
Aragon, yes, top of the class, Sandra. Yes, Aragon, and then even Zhen Yang's Teller. So we've had products now that we've sort of had talks on, and things like Chainalysis. I think back in 2018, there's no way that we would have let that talk through, because though it was an interesting tech, we'd want them to talk about how they do the tracing, but not about their product, because we're worried that it would then sound too much like we were selling products and get in trouble in that way. All right, enterprise Ethereum and supply chain. So Rob did mention that.
So, Peter, I was just going to interrupt you
Yep.
briefly, because I know you said with Solidity there's a lot of sort of application style examples and all that sort of thing. But I think the other interesting thing for me was that also looking at the strategies, like, for example, using formal verification, that was a completely new concept within, testing, especially when you start looking at hacks that are coming, like those really big hacks, and what can formal verification bring to the
Yeah, and that's something that didn't really exist. And then there was the whole Daphne journey, not only for the contracts, but at the actual specification of the protocol layer. Hey, yeah,
Yeah, I have to
very
say, I just wanted to add that I think formal verification is also something that has, in a way, benefited from blockchain. It's kind of found another reason to exist or to add value by, because of all of the hacks that happen over time. It's kind of shown a need for have more, let's say, more formal analysis on the protocols. Now, this is not widely applied, but I feel like there are projects like the one on formal verification of ZK VMs that they leverage formal verification applied to ZK VMs that, well, essentially, formal verification found a new avenue where it can be applied and where there is a reason as these are critical systems.
yeah. Yeah. And it's sort of, I guess, the money, like the technology's there, and then the money from in blockchain has flowed to formal verification. So hence you've got more people doing it as well, which then allows more stuff to be verified. Okay, enterprise Ethereum. So I'm not sure if Shao made it on. He was going to, but it is about 3 a.m. in Spain. And I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "No problem at all." But anyway, not to worry. Um, okay, so though I've got David, Charles, and myself, I think many of us were involved in this. In fact, the differentiator that Pegasus protocol engineering at Consensus had was that we were going to be enterprise focused and do all this enterprise stuff. And that reasonably quickly changed, but still enterprise was a big thing, and it still is, I think. Well, actually, I shouldn't talk because I'm not at Consensus anymore, so I don't really know. But when I left back in what 2022, 23, it was still a thing. Maybe not as big as it once was, but it was still a thing. And so supply chain on blockchain. I don't know, David, do you want to talk to this or?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Look, I think at that time, we were being incentivized to really think hard about scaling and about trying to get commercial adoption. And of course, that mostly meant adoption of core Ethereum. And in those early days, we were looking at architectures where enterprises would have their own private or enterprise blockchain, and that would somehow interact with mainnet. And the architectures that eventually got produced, had intermediaries, right? So over the last couple of years, we've really seen the rise of L2s and L3s filling that niche because they make enterprise adoption so much easier. Back in the day, we had interest, and enterprises were very interested in what they were seeing. They're interested in the opportunities for disintermediation or the potential shakeup of their industries, but they were all watching each other to see what they were going to do. Relatively few enterprises tried to create their own private chains. Banco Santander in Spain, I think, was an early exception, and their blockchain lab was doing great work. We had a few standout examples of that, but by and large, it was not taken up because the market friction was too high. In the sort of intermediate period before the rise of L2s and eventually L3s, we had things like just lost the protocol that's used to pin hashes of contracts on mainnet for enterprises. Rob, Peter, come on, somebody help me out.
Yeah.
It's called the something protocol.org.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about the thing that was Quorum, part of Quorum, aren't you?
It's spun out of that.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
no. Anyway, the point was that enterprises had all these use cases, and they were often about payment, but they were just as often about permissionless proof of something. And when you start talking about proof of anything, there are really two things that you naturally lead to. One is some kind of consensus algorithm, which led us into a wide exploration of different consensus algorithms that might have very high transaction rates, but low scaling for enterprise uses. And the other thing you talk about naturally is attestation on the public chain of something having happened. And that, these days, I think even 2019, 2020, 2021, we were talking about representing various kinds of things on mainnet so that they could be publicly attested without exposing all the details of what some enterprise is up to. A good example of this is just when two companies enter into a contract, they hash an agreed version of that contract, they pin that on mainnet, and if there's ever some disagreement, they can go back and say, no, this is the document that we're talking about, and here's the proof that it's the same document, that sort of thing. So there were plenty of enterprise use cases, but that, the market dynamics of uptake were really significant. So these days, you would say that the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is all about L2s and L3s. Enterprise uptake is all about L2s and L3s. Commercial activities on mainnet is all happening at the L2 and L3 level. But of course, we didn't know any of that at the time. So I think in a very typical computer science manner, the early innovators needed to lay some groundwork so that eventually, a couple layers of abstraction later, mainstream corporates could use the system. And I think that's really been evident that it finally happened in that sort of 2023, 24, 25 timeframe.
Though, yeah, I think there is certainly some stuff that has happened. And in fact, real world asset things, which is sort of enterprisey, but not, and it's funny that like Mantra, all caps, are an L1 and not an L2. And they're representing real world stuff on chain. But it's beyond, like, I think all the supply chain things. I reached out to some of the authors from the Supply Chain on Blockchain Conference 2021 last year or maybe the year before on LinkedIn and said, are you using blockchain still in your supply chain solution? And the answer from all of them was no. And for all of them, it was complexity. And so my feeling, my reason why Enterprise Ethereum died was you're asking half a dozen different companies to hire a DevOps engineer or three, because that DevOps engineer might go on holidays, and run their own complicated blockchain software stack. So some Docker container, but running some stuff, it's got to be reliable, and they've got to have people who can do it. And it's not their standard IT people. So I think that just meant the cost was super high, even though the transaction rate was low. That was my take on it. But
I think you're confusing the two. I think you just explained very cogently why Enterprise Ethereum had to wait on business deals that could be done with third parties. Right, that's the L2, L3 ecosystem. I think for the supply chain side, supply chains are flexible, dynamic, as we've learned this year, highly related to economic incentives such as tariffs and trade agreements. And they're fundamentally loose, poorly mapped, and structured by relationship. None of them benefited from a highly technical solution. None of those properties are benefited by a highly technical solution. So I think that on the enterprise side, you get a lot of enterprise use now for things that aren't supply chain oriented. And I think the supply chain side was a blind alley. I don't think that blockchains were a natural fit for the dynamics of the space. But of course, we were pursuing it as technologists, not as economists. And I think we learned a lot about the ill applicability of blockchains in supply chain management.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it was a real learning journey from this is something that's going to take over the world to this is never going to work. Yeah. All right. And so another part of this was essentially a core Ethereum piece that sort of never happened, but a few of us got highly involved in it for a good year or so. Yeah, and it was Ethereum 1.x. And so the whole idea was, well, here I am, I'm saying what Ethereum 1.x. Sandra, what was Ethereum 1.x?
Thanks, Peter. Yes, I mean, I think Ethereum 1.x was really interesting because initially, as far as I understood it, it was sort of the concept was it was kind of going and doing smaller changes to get ready for Ethereum 2, the whole vision of Ethereum 2. But I think it was back in 2017 where Vitalik actually proposed this concept of a stateless client initially. So that sort of concept of statelessness came quite early on. So 1.x, you remember when we were in it, like in the research part of it, new ideas would come up and then that didn't work and then something else happened. So the focus of 1.x then pivoted towards statelessness. So that was the whole thing, that the recognition that there's state bloat effectively. And why does every full node need to keep all of the state when really that is not necessary? So even though there's not a big gas cost in initially, creating the state, then the maintenance of it is quite expensive as well. So, and I think just the concept that only block proposers. So I think the whole idea was instead of full statelessness, the adoption of like weak statelessness was accepted. So saying that only block proposers need to keep all of the state and the other validators don't need to keep state. And well, how were we going to do that? So that's then when the whole concept of a witness came about, where a witness would be attached at the time when a block is proposed to have a witness, or not, witnesses will also be created. But the idea is then that if you want to verify the validity of that, if you want to verify the block, then you don't need all of the state because that witness will contain everything you need to be able to verify that. So to me, that is a fantastic concept. And what happened is, even though the idea was there was a lot of debate, will 1.x sort of statelessness go first and then Ethereum 2? But as it happened, stateless Ethereum is still ongoing. It's not dead. It's still going to happen. Initially, some of the sort of issues that they had is that the witnesses were a bit too big because using Merkle Patricia trees, tries, they were just too big. And then a big moment came along when Merkle trees were introduced, and we looked at polynomial commitments, which reduced that hugely. Anyway, I'm talking a lot, but anyway, I mean, state expiry was another thing that's been discussed, but as far as I know, that's been pushed out. And also there was talk that Merkle tries would be part of the latest hard fork in Fusaka, but again, that was, I think the complexity of it, because it was already such a major upgrade, has been pushed out. And as I understand it, we're probably only looking 2026, 27 for like proper statelessness and Merkle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think 1.x, the idea was that 2.0 was going to take too long, so let's get in early.
Exactly.
And so early on in 2020, I think so everyone, of course, knows that COVID happened. And the company that we'd worked at, Consensus, was having a bit of a crisis, to say the least. Every company was having a crisis, you know. And so we got redirected from working on cross-chain stuff to, like Ethereum Foundation needs help with Ethereum 1.x. See what you can do. We've no idea, and there's like 50 topics in 1.x, and that's why we started it. But then, in the end of the day, at least some of us, I know David and myself, then spun out and started working on Filecoin, and help save consensus by earning $200 million. Yeah, help Filecoin work out how to retrieve files. But it was a good fun whilst we did it. It was a great project. And then there was Ethereum too, which was another great project that we all got involved in. And well, we all isn't actually me much at all, but a lot of you, say you, Sandra, you, Roberto, got really involved in Ethereum too. And so, Roberto, when are we going to see some shards? You work at Ethereum Foundation. You should be able to tell us this.
Well, we already see some data sharding with Fusaka. It's a different type of sharding, but compared to what the sharding we were speaking, long time ago. That's why basically things have moved on to moved away from say this having these different shards and all baked into these different execution shards all baked into the same consensus protocol with and the problem there was mainly the communication and inter-shard getting messages across different shards, and then there was the shift towards a rollup centric roadmap, which has then led to this concept of data availability sampling. What you want is a different type of sharding. You are sharding on the availability of the data across different nodes. So sharding as it was originally conceived, I don't think will ever happen. But we have a different. So the protocol has evolved from like execution sharding to, if you want, data sharding.
Yeah, or data availability shard,
Yeah.
which is essentially what it's become.
Yeah.
And so, like there was a lot of things that we've got there. And so MEVina ETH2 was the last time I could see any of the talks actually name ETH2. And so when was the actual merge? Was that must have been 2022, given the talk names and like ETH merge update and such like.
Yeah, I believe so. I don't recall exact date. Yeah.
Yeah, feels like 100 years
I
ago.
can check.
Yeah. And so I guess the sharding didn't make it, but was there any other things that we thought were going to make it into ETH2 that haven't made it yet?
Good question. I think some of the technologies and concepts we discussed before are like, in a way, like Sandra was mentioning, stateless is not dead. There is probably at some point, like I think there's this concept, as you mentioned, we do stateless before, and then the merge, and then the merge was prioritized. I think stateless, like at least a week stateless, is something that's still quite hot, as that's something we need to move to snark proofs of the consensus layer, which is something that is on the long-term horizon. So that's definitely, say, one thing. Even state expiry, like these concepts have been, in my opinion, delayed. They're still under consideration. So like there are things that were considered perhaps before Ethereum the merge, and then they are still being considered. So, but other concepts don't really come to mind at this point in time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now on to cross-chain. And so we've had a lot of cross-chain talks over the years, and that's in large or in part because that's, I don't know, something that so really early on, that future of blockchain talked about roll-ups and essentially technology and the realization that you would need to communicate between your roll-ups and between Ethereum. That was essentially what the talk was way back then. And so I thought, well, hence we've got to work out how these roll-ups are going to work, or, at the time I wasn't calling them roll-ups. I think someone else came up with that terminology. And so we've got, some early talks which were around how to have these other chains, like somehow or other tied to Ethereum. And then I was doing a PhD, so it became a PhD topic, which yeah. And so I came up with two different two-phase commit protocols that allow secure cross-chain communications, but no one's using them, which is unfortunate. But so Sandra, what's your take? Why does no one use atomic cross-chain protocols, and they just use like ones where it's a best effort and you retry if you need to, or something like that? Why do people do that?
That's an interesting question. I think probably technologically it's a fairly difficult solution to implement, and I think it comes at because a lot of things get locked up while we wait for that thing to for the whole function to complete, which gives it that security. But it looks like people are prioritizing quick and fast over really secure. So to me, the real advantage of GPACT is the security, the economic security that it offers. But it's almost like people have put it in the too expensive or too hard box to really take on, which is a shame when you look at some of the mega sort of breach hacks that have occurred, and you wonder how could those have been prevented. But anyway, I think probably the main thing is probably just the complexity of the solution. So it's technically sound, but it's probably not that easy for people to implement. I don't know what you think, Peter.
Yeah, look, I think the complexity of having to coordinate invariably you've got to coordinate 4 transactions,
Yeah.
So 2 on the source chain, 2 on the destination chain. And in fact, GPAC's designed for an arbitrary call chain across many chains, which of course, is Star Wars stuff that no one's going to use. But at the time, it seemed like quite a reasonable concept. And I mean, people still do talk about you want to buy an NFT on one chain with ERC20s on, say, 2 or 3 different chains, and somehow or other bringing all that together all in one go, whether it's an all happens or nothing happens. And so people talk about it, but then they end up coming up with alternative ways of doing it, and using liquidity bridges and such like. Yeah, so I think that's a big part, and I think the having to modify the application layer to have locked assets,
Yes.
yeah, that was a huge impediment.
I think that is something that people find concerning. I was going to say something now and I've just forgotten. Oh yes, I think one thing that I think is really novel and good about that is the whole concept of atomicity, because to have an atomic transaction where typically with anyone who's familiar with databases, when you do transactions, something goes wrong, you can roll back. And that is something that through this complex cross-chain communication, you've managed to build in, so that if anywhere along the whole process of locking up funds and checking back to whether everything is valid, you can roll back and no one loses out. So I think that to me was pretty powerful. So it's a shame it's not being taken up, but who knows?
Yeah. Lecky, I can see your hands up.
Yes, it's interesting that I recently did a conference paper, and it's about the cross chain. Yes, the atomicity is the challenge because it's a multi-domain. The one that can achieve is the HTLC, the hash time lock, but which is not really bot using. The most volume and common been using is the federated sidechain and the external verifier or notary scheme. That one got the most volume. Yeah, but the atomicity is a challenge, and I decided developed a new framework to bring back the atomicity. It's using the intent marketplace plus the MPC and plus TE, so that can drive more detail next time. It's a really complicated three-layer framework, but that's the idea that I try to bring back the atomicity back to the core string. Because when I did a survey for the people that doing MEV, so MEV was quite mature in the single blockchain network. It's because of this flashboard to bring the atomicity of the transaction. It can either success or fail, and there's also flash loan to increase the capital efficiency. But when it comes to the core string, you don't have those. So that's why the MEV in core string is also lack of support and to capture it. That's where I develop a system to try to bring those more practical to the core string. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I'm just switching cameras and hopefully get that on. Yeah, well, and I think in the new year, we'll have to have you on for a talk, Lecky, because I think it's going to be interesting to hear your ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
All right.
We can't see you, Peter. Well, I can't.
Oh, can't you? Ooh. Let me. What about now? Yes, worked much better. Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay, but after almost an hour of standing, it's time to sit down at my desk. Yes. All right. Cross chain. All right. Layer twos. So we've done a darn lot of talk on layer twos, and haven't things evolved? There's a lot of talk early on, like just Raiden technologies that have come and gone. Starknet, so the version of that we looked at there's not many chains out there at all. In fact, Immutable X is one of the last. Um, and we had a look at, and then into 2022, into how consensus was going to do linear, and then we've looked at all of the technologies like the blobs and sequencing for roll-ups. And the economics, what about ZK roll-ups? Are they going to work in the long term? And are there alternatives to roll-ups, like the OP, or could you do like ZK fraud proofs? And how is that all going to work? So I think that the L2 space is continuing to evolve. But it was heartening to see that we had an early Maiden talk up here somewhere, and then even recently we've had another Maiden talk. So I think specialized ZK rollups are still a thing, which is interesting. Okay, and so Lecky and I are going to try and answer all your DeFi questions. And I know the first question that you've all got is ETH going to go up? And we've only ever done one talk on that. And that was, I got the chief economist at Consensus to essentially do the "Is ETH going to go up" talk, where he told you how to think about economics. But so Lecky, like we've had a lot of DeFi talks, and when you look at this set that we've got here, where do you think things are headed, and what are your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, I don't think the ETH price is related too much to the DeFi space. Um, but yes, I do know what you mean that there's so yeah, the DeFi space I think is shift a lot from DeFi shift back to CeFi. That DeFi summer was back to 2020, and then even for myself, I play lots of DeFi, but especially this year, I play more CeFi now. Um, it's well, one thing is DeFi get hacks a lot. Like even like the most recent one, the really big hack is the balancer
Mm,
with more than 100 million hacks because they to be claimed to be a safe protocol that lots of forks across lots of different blockchain network. So when it got hacked, it's not just one protocol. It's lots of the forks got also get hacked. But then after FTX hacks, the exchange become more transparent to expose their treasury periodly, like every a quarter or something. And now they even bring um, the custodial wallet to be the DeFi wallet. Like DeFi used to be the people that you have to learn how to use it and only by yourself, which is hard to reach from the CeFi. But now they bring it from the CeFi that you don't need to worry about your key. Like they make a smart wallet, like a custodial wallet, but you can do the same thing as a DeFi wallet, like all the yield farmings and all the LPs and use. You can do all of them.
mm,
And it's becoming more transparent, more safe to do it than the DeFi case. And even more is so they could do DeFi and you could also do CeFi. So you could sort of doing both in a exchange wallet. Like for example, there's a Binance Alpha and there's a OKX X launch that is like some of the um, campaigns that like when the project want to launch on the exchange, they will give the tokens for the exchange to hand out, and the exchange would do those campaign that is exclusive to the exchange platform, and those that brings like you can sort of play CeFi and DeFi all together at one place. So that's more like one of the mass adoption use case I can see that which is bring more new players, which is a good thing to more people to use it and also reduce the entry barrier for the people to try DeFi without all those like a barrier to understand LPs, how to do LPs and the risk of doing LPs. So that's what I see. Um, the DeFi space have been shifted. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. And it's interesting that CeFi becoming a bit DeFi or allowing you with all these smart wallets. It's yeah, yeah.
Yes, it's really impressive. They even bring in some functionality that you don't have in DeFi. For example, one of the function is called auto sell. So you
Mm,
can buy and sell in the same block in a Binance smart wallet. So so they have a campaign to so you bring the volume, you get points. Which is like the and different and the more volume you bring, the more points you will have. but people would try to minimize their slippage and have a higher volume. And then they created a new functionality called auto sell. So you could sell in the same block with the minimum slippage
Mm.
and dry up your volume and to get more points. So that's a really interesting way that like in a DeFi wallet is like it's easier to do it in a CeFi exchange's smart wallet in this way. It's quite innovative. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we
That's
have we have stronger trust assumptions, right? Still with CeFi compared to DeFi.
Mm. Yeah,
Yes.
100%.
Yes. They get is that at 300? Like last time I get her ZZ talking about it, got like more than 300 license, like more than 300 countries, like global license of the countries. So there's more transparency on the treasury, the backup, and more licensing, more uh, governance, and more audit, like becoming more trust and more a governance way to on the exchange than before. Um, to for the people to use it like less risk for compared to the exchange before. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we've been going for quite a while. How's that? We're pretty much to time. That's amazing. All right. So this is a map. In fact, there's an interactive version there too of the world. And all of the dots is where someone has at some point registered as being part of the meetup on meetup.com. So it's not, so YouTube's obviously a completely separate deal. And a few things I'll point out though before anyone gets too excited. The St. Petersburg, Moscow, and Omsk were done prior to sanctions in 2022. So those are historic things, and I'm sure meetup.com would stop anyone who is in, say, all of those are in South Korea as well. None of them are like north of the border. Um, yeah, that one there, I remember that coming and I'm going, where is Ponta Delgado? And I'm going, wow. And so you can actually hear, you can zoom in, if I can remember how to do that. Yeah. And yeah, so you can, you can even see, so there's some dude or yeah, someone anyway, hanging out on the beach, hopefully in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, which is absolutely awesome. I hope they, if they're not here today, which I don't think they are, I hope that they watch the video and um, but yeah, so people from all over the world, which was really amazing. Yeah, pretty much yeah, a lot of representation all around Europe, Americas, Australia, New Zealand, India. I mean, all around the world. Only place that we didn't have anyone was Antarctica. And so this graph here is about the number of attendees who've RSVP'd over time. And so when we started out, we had an initial burst of essentially people who were curious and they were interested to turn up. And I think I did the cryptography talk. And I think, oh, um, so the people who were just curious about blockchain and Ethereum, but so anyway, but different people turn up to different talks is what I've learned. So anyway, so we bounced around and then I think when we were getting everyone to come in all the time, so we at Consensus in Brisbane, we didn't force, but we strongly encouraged people once a fortnight, come in for the meetup. You can meet people, you have lunch, you can learn something. And so we had a lot of people coming in, plus obviously for something with that many people, we had a lot of people turn up. And in fact, I think that was another introduction to Ethereum style talk to really try and bring people in generally and help the overall community learn about stuff. And then in 2020, COVID hit. And so we went from using the horrible video camera that I'd got to using Zoom. And the audio and video quality went through the roof, and you could be anywhere in the world and you could be on the talk. And so we've had, like pretty much a straight line, more and more people watching or attending or saying they're going to attend. And, we were doing pretty well. And then I think AI hit. And then AI, people have only got so much focus time or time that they can learn about new stuff. And so my take on it, my guess, isn't that the talks in this era are not necessarily as interesting. It's just that there's a lot of other interesting things that people could spend their time on. So I'm not saying, oh, hey, run away, run for the hills. This is boring stuff that's going nowhere. But I think, a lot of people are, they've got a lot of other things as well. I think it's also the commoditization of blockchain and Ethereum that a lot of people probably feel that a lot of it has been sorted out.
Hey, Peter.
Yeah.
I can't help but notice that the general shape of that graph matches, the Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm product adoption curve. And I don't think that's unexpected. I think what you're saying and what that would suggest is that Ethereum simply become a mature background technology. Right? We're past the early adoption, past the degree of mainstream adoption we're going to get. Anybody who's coming into mainnet now is very much in the late adopter category. And the new action isn't just in AI, but it's also at protocols and levels and development that are above the mainnet protocols.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So I was able to get some stats out of YouTube as well. So overall, we've had 238,000 views of talks overall. And the most popular one is EVM, Solidity to bytecode memory and storage that David and I did, which really came out of the work so we were working on code Merkleization at the time. And how do we essentially do stateless Ethereum and try and break up Ethereum code blocks? And so learning all about that meant that I could do it, we were able to do a talk. And so what's interesting is, though, that early on, there were only like maybe 50 people a day watching it, but there have been some real spikes. And I don't know whether it's like some influencer has said something or some lecturer has said, hey, everyone, you need to watch this so you can learn about the EVM. But anyway, so that's that talk. The next most watched talk is about cross-chain bridge design, and it's had a few spikes as well. But one thing I noticed when I was looking at this is that the talks that have got less views generally came later. And the recruitment test, I thought this was actually really interesting, how to get through a recruitment test in Ethereum, or if you have a Solidity recruitment test, what might you ask people, has actually been surprisingly popular and continues to be. Talking about Solidity design patterns, smart contract security, front running, and amusingly, how to import a GitHub repo into Remix. So like a 2-minute video, which explains something that I know I took about half an hour to find. So obviously everyone else is trying to go, but how do I do this? So I thought that was rather hilarious. That something that I did off the cuff ended up having 4,000 views. Yeah, and like a talk that's more recent has had a few, only about 1,000 views, but I do wonder in time will that end up having 8,000 views or 10,000 views too? So where do we go in the future? So I think that the meetup will stay around in 2026 and beyond. And I think there's a lot of technology that's coming out that I think would be really interesting to dig into. So I think there's this whole privacy pool thing, which is sort of you might have heard of well, I was going to say Whirlpool, but that's the wrong term. What's the mixer technology that'll end you up in jail, especially if you're a developer? We're all thinking
Tornado Cash.
Tornado Cash. That's the one. Yes, yes, Tornado Cash. Yeah. So Vitalik and others have come up with an alternative to Tornado Cash that essentially allows you to do mixing and but make sure you're not mixing with baddies, essentially. Hyperliquid's another really interesting DeFi protocol, which is everyone should at least, put $100 into Hyperliquid just to get a bit of experience. It's very interesting. Then this whole post-quantum computing, it's something, a bit of a passion project of mine because it was my first PhD topic of how do we make Ethereum post-quantum crypto analysis good. And so it's interesting that it's now a hot topic and being actively worked on in Ethereum Foundation. So that's going to be really interesting. And so at the moment, there's Ethereum DA and Alt DAs, Celestia Eigen, that are used for L2s. And so I think at the moment, the Alt DA integration is good, but not perfect. And so I think there's a lot of research work going on there. And so at the moment, BLS is used. So this is a bit into the post-quantum realm. But like how do we get past the fact that we've got a lot of things tied to these BLS signatures, which are going to be susceptible. And then I think there's more to be thought about with AI and Ethereum. I know we've had half a dozen talks on AI and how it relates, but I'm sure we'll do more. And if you're interested in doing a talk, please reach out. My goal for 2026 is one talk a month. And in fact, the first talk I've already put in, and I'm going to vibe code a complex Ethereum contract, Solidity contract. And we're going to see whether you can vibe code a secure contract or not. Okay. So with all of that, are there any questions for myself or any of the other speakers or anyone else for that matter?
Less a question, more a comment, I guess, Peter. And it should go without saying, but I think it's important to say, is that without your drive and motivation to organize this, to have done this for the 8 years it's been on, and maybe it's going to reach a 10th birthday and you'll get to do one of these for what it's been like in 10 years. Without you doing that and leading this meetup would not have evolved, would not have lived, and would not have such a far-reaching group as we currently see from those maps. So I want to say that while there were people here in the early stages that helped kick this off and supported you in that, and the team has supported you, without you, the Ethereum Engineering Group meetup would not still be around. So thank you for all the service that you've given to this group, to this community, and to this technology in the last 8 years, and I look forward to hearing more about it over the next.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's okay.
Yeah, here.
Yeah.
100%.
I think I think that we should all do stuff for free every now and again. Like pro bono work is not a bad thing. And so I think if we can all teach more people about Ethereum, then it's probably a good thing. So yeah. So anyway, all right. Look, thank you all for your time. Thank you to all the speakers. This will be up on YouTube sometime soonish. And yeah, so have a great rest of your day. And yeah, thank you for coming along for the ride.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Peter.
Thank you very much.